Dear friends, the Remnant Newspaper published on December 20th, 2024, my new article. The title is Three World War in Pieces? Enjoy your listening. Pope Francis says we are living through a third world war in pieces. Is that true? The point is to understand what this war consists of and why we have reached this point. It is not possible to fully comprehend the present without knowing the past, but knowing the past does not simply mean having historiographical knowledge. It means having the right interpretative keys. The interpretative key is the concept of revolution. That is the inexorable, gradual, sometimes slow, other times faster, process of subversion of the order. We can describe revolution as 5 sieges, or rather 5 phases of a single great siege, carried out by Gnostic thought against the citadel of Catholic civilization. These phases are 5, because there are 5 great systems of relationship that every individual establishes with the reality outside of themselves. Starting from the outermost system to the most intimate one, we have religion, relationship between man and God; politics, relationship of law and justice among men; economy, relationship of exchange among men; society, relationship of each man with his neighbor and especially with the family; and humanity, relationship of each man with his own nature. Catholic civilization had built 5 walls that protected man according to these 5 systems of relationship. Revolution besieged starting from the outermost wall. The apex points of these 5 sieges were Protestantism, religion; Jacobinism and Bonapartism, politics; Marxism, economy; 68ism, society; and now transhumanism, anthropology. When the walls collapsed, the sieges continued and supported each other. For example, after the Protestant Revolution, the religious revolution continued. Today, the prevailing neo-modernism and the papacy of Francis are expressions of this revolution. This Third World War in pieces is, therefore, the natural continuation of the political and the economic revolutions, which are particularly intertwined. The goal is the advent of an absolute and global state that applies a centralized communist-type economy. This is, in fact, the translation in the political and economic field of what Gnostic pantheism represents at the metaphysical level. If it is true that we are all expressions of the same God, and if it is true that God and the universe are the same thing, and there is no other God outside the universe, then it is true that the form of government and politics that best reflects this vision is the one we have outlined, and that is being imposed. I have explored this historical and philosophical path in my essay, The Tiara and the Lodge: The Struggle of Freemasonry Against the Church, published in Verona, Italy, by Fede and Cultura, in 2024, unfortunately so far only available in Italian. The Cold War, contrary to what many believe, has never really ended. The events that led to the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 were not signs of a so-called détente between the Communist bloc and the Western bloc, but rather a realignment of the former. The axis of evil gradually shifted from Moscow to Beijing. This transition marked a new phase of ideological and geopolitical struggle. I had already advanced this interpretative key in my book Bordermark, published in Dallas, Texas, by Monolateral Publishing House in 2022, and published less than a month after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine. Developments have confirmed my analysis. In this essay, I explored how the tension between superpowers has never really diminished, but has simply transformed and adapted to new global contexts. However, we must have the courage to look at all these conflicts and geopolitical tensions with an overall and even metaphysical perspective, without falling into apocalyptic or approximate thinking, which tend to oversimplify processes that are anything but simple. Not only Westerners, and it would be necessary to open a separate chapter on what the West means today, but even Western Catholics have not yet understood that China represents one of the greatest threats on earth today, not only for Catholics, but for all free men. When I speak of China, I naturally do not mean the Chinese people, who, like every people, are called to contribute to the richness of that wonderful ark of salvation that is the Church, but the Chinese Communist Party. It seems evident, upon careful analysis, that so far the CCP has been the agent of multiple stress tests directed not only at the West but at the entire world. Starting with cultural pressures, it is now clear that China more or less directly finances wokeism and other subversive agendas in the United States and elsewhere to internally weaken Western powers. There is evidence to suggest that the well-known pandemic was spread by Chinese paramilitary entities, presumably with the aim of analyzing large-scale reactions of peoples and governments to a perceived, generalized danger and the propensity of citizens to accept pervasive state controls modeled on the Chinese social credit system. Furthermore, the Chinese government made deals with the Vatican, September 22, 2018, to conclude an agreement whose terms have not yet been made transparent and effectively contributed to pushing the Russians into a conflict in the heart of Europe, probably to also test the reaction of various other actors on an international scale. We are therefore facing a world war that, slowly, seems to be transitioning from cold to hot. We obviously pray that it never reaches a boiling point. As in every war, there are factions. On one side, NATO and the Western Bloc. On the other, an axis of evil with two main actors, China and the Islamic world. It should be noted that this does not mean that NATO, the Zionist powers, and more generally the no longer Christian West represent the good side of the conflict. It would also be interesting to delve into the role of the Islamic world in all this, how it too plays a significant part within the revolution. After all, Islam is a heresy of Christianity, and like every heresy, Islam is intrinsically revolutionary. And what its division in this war means, given that the Sunni world seems to have allied with the Western Bloc and the Shia world with the Russo-Chinese axis. But what is most concerning is the unperceived ideological transshipment, as the great Brazilian Catholic philosopher Plinio Corrêa de Oliveira used to say, which occurs among many Catholics who are friends of tradition. I cannot speak for the situation in the United States, but certainly in Italy and more generally in Europe, socialism in its more confessional hues attracts many children of the Church who sincerely want to be faithful to it, and this is due to a mistaken association. The violence of states like China is often confused with a potential ability to impose a moral view of life, in the face of the numerous powers that are enemies of God within the West itself. But virtue is never violence, and no one performs good deeds if they are done under compulsion. Freedom remains a fundamental value of the Church's social doctrine. The proud Christianity of Vladimir Putin is very likely a genuine expression of faith. However, faith can sometimes be instrumentalized for political purposes. China, with its growing global influence, uses geopolitical tensions to advance its own objectives, often exploiting religious and political frictions to consolidate its dominance. Ultimately, China's true interest is to establish a new world order, using various strategies to test the resilience of Western powers. Be careful. China itself is merely a pawn or an actor of the revolution. Tomorrow, another institution may take the reins. As some Carbonari wrote in the late 19th century, we die, but our struggle continues. In light of what has been briefly discussed here, it emerges that this Third World War in pieces is not a simple conflict of powers, but yet another phase of a long-term revolutionary process rooted in a project of global subversion of the Christian order. Every Catholic is called not so much to side with one faction or the other, but to respond with faith and reason, recognizing the true nature of this struggle and resisting the temptation to ally with oppressive regimes that, although opposed to certain aspects of Western modernity, pursue goals that are intrinsically incompatible with the Catholic vision of freedom and human dignity. Only a return to order, founded on Christ the King and respect for natural law, can guarantee the authentic and lasting peace that the world longs for, but continues to seek in the wrong places.